Let's take a call from Jack in Sandwich in Kent. Hello, Jack.
Hello.
Hello, what would you like to say?
Hi, I just want to say thanks for taking my call. I completely disagree with kind of the premise that the bill needs to be strengthened. So just for a bit of context, I'm in my early to mid-20s. I was on YouTube in 2010. I've been on social media since sort of about the same time, 2011, 2012. I was on Instagram when it first came out. Most people my age have grown up on the internet. We've grown up with the internet. We understand how it works. And every person that I talk to under the age of 35, whenever you mention this legislation, the groans and the negative reaction to it, I don't think is quite understood by either the people that have written the legislation and the people that are, with respect, older than the age of 35. The internet itself, when you go on social media, everything that you're seeing is not created by Meta. It's not created by Instagram. It's not created by YouTube. It's just created by other people. And so when
it's published by them, isn't it?
Sure. So when you talk about safety, when you read a Cosmopolitan magazine in the 90s, when the woman in the magazine was on the verge of anorexia, did we create legislation to say that, well, actually, we don't want kids that are in their teens looking at these magazines because it encourages anorexia? No, we didn't do that. Why didn't we do that? Well, the reason we didn't do that is probably because the magazines had a lot of money to lobby the government or to lobby someone to say that actually just leave us alone. Whereas what's happening through the Online Safety Act, this is not about protecting children. If it was about protecting children, it would just be targeted at pornography. That's not what this is. It's targeted at quotation marks of harmful content. Define harmful. In this country... Well,
encouraging people to commit suicide, for example, that's harmful. That's nothing to do with pornography.
Okay, sure. So define to me encouraging to commit suicide. Because if you were just talking about earlier about you scrolling on your Instagram Reels. Have you ever seen a video on your Instagram Reels where someone's saying you really ought to commit suicide?
No, because I'm not in the age group concerned, and there's no reason for an algorithm to point me in that direction. But there would be if you're possibly a 13-year-old girl.
Well, how do you know? You've
well, because we've seen all the examples.
Well, I mean, just to Jack's question, the coroner into the inquest into the death of Molly Russell, their view was that Instagram played a material role in her decision to end her life.
So I'm not familiar with the individual case. I'm not going to comment on an individual case that I'm not particularly familiar with. But I want to really nail on, in this country, we've just given the right of 16-year-olds to vote. Whether you agree with that, don't agree with that, we've just given them the right. Now, if you're giving someone the right to vote, part of that is you're giving them the responsibility to be well educated as to what's happening in this country and what's happening in the world, right?
Yeah, but I think we should be just clear as well that the Online Safety Act is principally about regulating illegal activity. So if someone,
it's not. No, it is.
Well, there's a lot of.
Hang on, Jack. Damian helped draft this legislation, so give him a listen.
If you look at the way the legislation is actually written, there's a whole the principal area of activity is enforcing the law online. So it shouldn't be right that a known fraudster who is extorting money from people shouldn't be able to advertise on Facebook in order to do it. When we know who they are. One of the things it includes is, someone who's a people trafficker shouldn't be able to promote their services to get people across the channel in small boats on social media platforms. And that if they are doing it, it's not just a job for the police to go and find them and arrest them. We should say to companies like Facebook, you must take these ads down, you mustn't allow this activity, and you certainly shouldn't be profiting from that behaviour. So inciting racial hatred is another example as well. We have laws in this country that govern other media and where there's clear responsibility. For some reason, social media was allowed to develop without that responsibility, but now it's been brought to bear on them. And you talked, Jack, earlier about magazines. Well, newspaper magazines have always had legal liability for what they publish. But Mark Mark Zuckerberg didn't have that liability for his platforms and people like him, and that's what the law changes.
Yeah, so if I could just land on my point about 16-year-olds. So here's my question to you. Is it safe for a 16-year-old to see videos of things that are happening in Gaza at the moment? So to see a video of, let's say, a child who's under the age of 10 who is crying as a result of a bomb being dropped on their house and them, for example, sustaining a massive injury. Is that safe for a young person to see that content? So this has nothing to do with what's illegal, not illegal. This has nothing to do with what you mentioned about traffickers. You know as well as I do that they already block that type of advertising content the same way a couple of years ago when there were some ISIS ads on YouTube, that we had an whole adpocalypse. You know about that as well as I do. That's not what this legislation is targeting.
The issue was with those sorts of cases you brought up, they weren't effective at doing it. Yeah.
Jack, it doesn't help if you keep trying to speak over Damian. Let him make his point, and then you can come back.
Just my question.
No,
my question about the Gaza question.
Yeah. So we understand what sort of content is safe for children to see, and there are different standards for what children should be exposed to, and if the platforms know they're serving content to a child, they should be mindful of that. But this is not about distressing images. The legislation is not there to stop people being offended and distressed by what they see. What it is there to do in the case of children is to stop children being systematically targeted with content that might persuade them to take their own life. Content that shows people cutting themselves and glorifies and celebrates ending your own life. And that's the type of stuff that has existed. And we wanted a law to say to the companies, you are responsible for this sort of content. You must mitigate it. You must remove it when it's there. There are clear legal standards we expect you to meet.
Okay, final comment from you, Jack.
Well, okay, final comment would be on the way the legislation is crafted. Look, I come from a cybersecurity background. So one thing I just want to say to people is with the online safety act, the way it's currently designed is if you go on a website that potentially maybe has content that meets the requirements that Ofcom set in, you are going to be asked to hand over your private information. Now, you don't know where this is going to be stored. You don't know how this is going to be stored. So think about all the different websites you access throughout a year. Think about all the different websites you access throughout several years. You're going to end up giving your private information, maybe photos of your passport, maybe photos of your address, all this private information to hundreds and hundreds of different websites that you don't know how they store that, you don't know where they store that. And so if you want to implement this legislation, it should be done on the hardware level. Apple, when you buy an Apple phone, Apple already know your age. When you buy an Android phone, the operating system itself knows who you are. And so the idea and this comes from the fact that the government, with respect, is being led by people who are not tech savvy. If the government wanted to implement this effectively, what you do is you go to the software, the hardware developers, and you say to them, look, what we want you to do is we just want you to keep a track of the people, the identity of the person who's with this phone, and we don't want you to allow them to download apps or access websites that are considered to be potentially harmful to them. Now, I think that's a terrible premise in and of itself, but the amount of people...
even if they did that, it wouldn't work because people would get round it, relatively simply, I suspect. Listen, we've gone way over our time that I should go to a break. 6 minutes, Jack. Thank you very much indeed.